Found your weak spot. No, there was nothing he could do about this. Holy was a lethal attribute for undead. It was a pretty hard one to overcome, and impossible if he was protecting against fire. The pair glared at each other and cast their next spells. Of course, Sholtia chose the same one brilliant radiance. And then how many times did they go back and forth like that? Sholtia's health was also going down. If she hadn't been sneakily using MP to activate a skill that decreased the effects of magic on her, it might have even reached 0. I'd expect nothing less. In a battle of magic, Lord Aints has me overwhelmingly beat in both offense and defense. I pummeled him with holy magic, but compared to me, he hasn't even taken that much damage, although his MP has dropped quite a bit. She could see his MP, and compared to when they had started, it had gone down quite a lot. Still, the flames known as the will to fight still blazed in his eyes. It gives me the chills. I can wait to see that wonderful man's determination get crushed. I can wait to see him warp into a beaten dog. She fought back the sensations that were building in her lower body. If she were in her room, she would have sent for her vampire brides. But unfortunately, they weren't around. And of course, she couldn't take care of herself where she was at the moment. Then I'll have to get my satisfaction via combat. She looked at Aints with eyes gleaming with lust and licked her lips. If she widened the gap between them even farther, how would he react? Okay, I am going to take the liberty of healing. Maximize magic greater lethal. Living things healed with justice energy and took damage from negative energy. Undead were the reverse. For that reason, greater lethal, which poured out a ton of negative energy, was the best healing spell for undead like Sholtia. I see. I am also running low on health greater lethal. Sholtia blinked a few times. She couldn't believe what was happening before her eyes. Seeing Aints' wounds heal, she had to accept it. How can you cast the faith magic spell greater lethal? Was it on one of your class's spell lists? Nah. Unfortunately, this isn't my power. It's an external one I got from a magic item, an item that lets me use one spell of my choice. But then I have to use up a whole gear slot for it. I can piggyback any magic boosting skills on it, and it's not as powerful as it would be when a real faith magic caster uses it. So honestly, there's not much point. Grumbling about what a pain it was, Aints cast it again. Sholtia murmured, well, there goes one of my plans, but his MP would still go down, so it wasn't that big of an issue. Having decided that, she cast it again and healed her wounds. At level 100, it wasn't so easy to fully heal. Then at the end, maximize magic greater lethal. Having healed up, Aints was casting defensive magic on himself. Sholtia was a faith-type magic caster. Perorancino hadn't given her info about that spell, so she had no idea what Body of Effulgent Beryl did. She noticed the green aura he had reappeared. She assumed it must have been some kind of defensive spell. He was about to come at her directly. Right when she was about to make her move, brandishing her pipette lance, she heard a complaint. It seemed like it had just slipped out. This fight is so lopsided. The comment caught her off guard, and her grip on the lance relaxed a bit. Then she thought, so you finally noticed. But she made the rational judgment that saying it aloud would be rude to her master, Aints. Master? Lord Aints? The words kept popping up in her mind and they puzzled her. Why was she up in arms against her master, Aints? But that's just how things were. There were many things in the world that were impossible to understand. It had to just be one of those things. Despite deciding that, she felt, on a separate note, that Aints' behavior was lacking consistency. She called out to him in a voice that made it hard to feel like they were in the middle of a fight. If it is so lopsided, why not withdraw? Well, yes, but she had the feeling his supposedly immobile face twisted into a bitter grin. Yes, I am very selfish, Sholtia. I don't want to run away. Aints looked to his empty bony hand, and Sholtia looked as well, following his gaze. It is something nobody would understand, or maybe they think it is stupid, but at this moment, I am feeling really fulfilled as a guild master. I wonder why that is. I was always the guild master, but the majority of what I did was odd jobs and regulation. It wasn't like I stood at the head of the line to lead everyone, but now I am fighting on the front lines for the guild. Maybe I am just self-satisfied. Is that what it is like? A man's pride? Maybe. It could also just be despair. Oops, we put a damper on our fight with this boring conversation. How about we start back up? Aints calmly looked on as Sholtia moved into a fighting stance with her pipette lance. To win, he had to get through this close-quarters fight. The armor on Sholtia's back bulged, and bat wings grew through it. Aints knew what would happen next. Several large bats born from her back flew into the air. They were elder vampire bats created with summon kin. A swarm of vampire bats followed. They were very strong, but Aints couldn't just let them do what they wanted. He immediately cast a spell, Shark Cyclone. A tornado over 300 feet tall and over 150 feet wide suddenly appeared. It was black with dirt it had whipped up. The tornado drew in the bats as they tried to get away and trapped them inside. There were shadows gliding along inside the raging winds of the tornado. They swam as if they were in the ocean. Sharks 20 feet long swam among them. They flocked to the bats, which were desperately trying to fly against the wind, as if food had been dropped onto the surface of their water. The spell was effective against flying creatures. It showed its true worth as the sharks ripped off the elder vampire bat's wings in the blink of an eye and chomped them to pieces. While they went to work on the vampire bats, something bit into the raging winds. It was a crimson lump that flew straight through the tornado at high speed. Its tip stuck out, leaving a fiery afterimage like the trail of a jet. Aints was unable to respond quickly enough. Sharp pain ripped through his body. He could feel all his bones getting crushed and scattered. While he was distracted for that one instant, Sholtia moved right up in front of him and thrust her terrible weapon into his chest. Crushing bones along its way, the tip all but pierced his back. He gasped in pain. The hit from the weapon had a battering attribute. It had taken a huge chunk out of his health. As an undead, Aints could handle pain. It was suppressed automatically after reaching a certain intensity, like his emotions. That's why even a combat amateur like Satoru Suzuki could function calmly without getting tripped up by it. But this was severe. This felt like his life was actually in danger. Starting to feel far removed from everything, similar to the darkening of one's vision after severe blood loss, Satoru Suzuki's fragile mental state faltered. But Aints' will was stronger than that. The man fighting this battle right now was not Satoru Suzuki. It was the highest ruler of the Great Tomb of Nazarick, Aints Ul Gaun. Sholtia's attack was unrelenting as he groped for his next tactic. The blade was still inside him. She pushed deeper and deeper. As the tip sank in, the thicker point of the lance drove home. The sensation of his body being ripped apart, the pain coursing through him, and his health plummeting, these sensations made Aints activate Body of Effulgent Beryl. The aura of green around him shattered. The Tier 10 spell, Body of Effulgent Beryl, decreased damage taken from battering weapons for its duration. It also allowed one-time full immunity from the damage. By having Body of Effulgent Beryl absorb the damage from the lance, its tip moved out of his body as if time had been rewound. From the position he'd been pushed by the lance, Aints cast a spell at Sholtia, who wasn't quite sure what had happened. Wall of skeleton, countless armed skeletons made up the bone wall that now stood between the pair. Their weapons came down on, stabbed, and swiped at Sholtia, but not a single one reached her. Maximize magic force explosion. Invisible shock waves raged around Sholtia. The bone wall took them, then warped dramatically, and finally broke into pieces. The collapsing bones made a sound like rain falling as they scattered. But they had done some good for Aints, even just by securing him a bit of time. Release. At Aints' command, Greater Magic Seal launched 30 shots of white light from each of 3 magic circles for a total of 90. These were neutral attribute magic arrow spells. As they streaked through the air, they were as beautiful as the beating of an angel's wings, but these were angels of death. Tier 1 spells couldn't get past Sholtia's magical defenses. Something probably felt off about him casting a spell that wouldn't work, so she scrambled to dodge to the side. But the white lights turned at a right angle in pursuit and pummeled her like a sudden rain shower. The barrage of 90 white spells took a huge chunk out of her health. The shots that had hit her had been temporarily upgraded to the equivalent of Tier 10 spells via skill, and Aints' attack wasn't over yet. Saw, triplet obsidian sword. 3 shining black swords appeared in the air. They flew toward Sholtia as if by their own wills. "Don't bother me," Sholtia seemed to say as she slashed them away with her pipette lance. But even after being flung away, the obsidian swords went after her. It would be incredibly difficult to break these swords of magic with physical attacks. Magic destruction. Sholtia used up what little remaining MP she had to launch a magic cancelling spell. It erased 2 of the obsidian swords, but the remaining one continued to attack her. The chance of success with magic destruction depended on the skill of the casters. In other words, they now knew for sure who the better caster was. Ah, how annoying. Sholtia ignored the sword that kept slashing at her and closed in on Aints. That small amount of damage wouldn't hurt her at all. She swung her pipette lance and whacked Aints. He was weak against battering damage. Unable to ignore it, he went flying and cast Fly in midair to regain his balance. But then shit. He lost composure and yelled for the first time since the battle had begun. His health wasn't so low that he couldn't recover from the blow. The problem was the phenomenon occurring before his eyes. Sholtia was healing the health that had been sucked out of him, was restoring her. It was healing her faster than the obsidian sword could deal damage. To make her lose the health she just recovered, Aints cast a spell. Triplet Maximize Magic Reality Slash. The 3 simultaneous tears in space caused blood to spurt out of Sholtia's body, but she ignored it and approached to close the distance, with the obsidian sword following behind her. All Sholtia can do now that she's out of MP is close in and fight with her pipette lance at a range that will work. That's my least preferred way to fight. Aints fired another attack as he retreated using Fly. Triplet Maximize Magic Reality Slash. Although he was running away, the distance between them shrank with each eye blink. That was the difference between the speed of Fly and the speed of flight, buffed with a skill. Still spouting blood, Sholtia was now right before his eyes, and she balled up her body at that moment. Space distorted, and shock waves raged around her. That's not force explosion, it's impure shock shield. The shock waves born of her skill broke the obsidian sword and headed for Aints, eventually blowing him dramatically back. Gug, gar. She must have piggybacked some other skill on top of impure shock shield. Aints rolled twice, 3 times across the dirt, until Fly and his items forcibly corrected his stance. Perhaps he didn't have semicircular canals, or maybe it was due to being undead, but he could glare at Sholtia without feeling dizzy at all. The knockback effect was lucky. Aints didn't want a close quarters fight. If there was distance between them, it meant he had time to use more magic. He was about to cast a spell when he saw light gathering in front of Sholtia as she tried to regain her human size. Aints knew what that was. His immobile face twitched as Sholtia flashed a grin reserved for those who were crushing their opponents. So here it is, it's finally here. I figured it would happen at some point, but that point is now, Einherjar, her greatest ace. The white light took on a completely human form. It resembled its user quite a bit, besides its white armor and faintly glowing white skin. Aints knew that it didn't just resemble her in looks. Some of her magic abilities and skills were lost. She didn't have any items, but her gear and ability points were exactly the same as Sholtia's by race. She wasn't an undead but a construct like a golem. Resistance-wise, she was about the same as Sholtia. In other words, she was another Sholtia, one that could perform only direct combat. Aints had been expecting this, of course, but having to fight 2 level 100 opponents at once was still a huge burden. Then she summoned countless kin wolves, bats, and a pack of rats, and so on. None of them was as big a threat as Einherjar, but the power of their numbers couldn't be taken lightly. I can use an area of effect spell to finish off all of those at once, but what can I do about Einherjar? Aints was watching to see what Sholtia would do when Einherjar charged at him. This he hadn't expected. Why isn't Sholtia moving? Wasn't she planning on crushing me with the power of numbers? His question melted as he shifted his gaze. The flames in his vacant orbits grew large. That is so low, he shouted without thinking. Was that allowed? He saw Sholtia annihilating the kin she summoned by running them through with her pipette lance. She was healing herself with the pipette lance by killing her own kin. It goes without saying that the amount of healing the pipette lance could provide depended on the amount of damage dealt. Aints was the same level as Sholtia and had high defenses, while her kin were weak. It was obvious which would heal her better. Aints watched as she recovered more and more health. She stabbed one after another with her lance, destroying them. It was so cruel and totally unforeseen. Perhaps it was only natural to have such a tactic, given that friendly fire was on. Aints recomposed himself and adjusted his strategy to these unexpected circumstances. Still, he couldn't completely suppress the shock of seeing this scene. He would never have encountered the killing of one's own kin to heal oneself in Yggdrasil. Einherjar had reached him and struck him squarely. Jigua, Aints grunted as he flew backward. Einherjar charged after him with a blank expression. Aints took hits as he retreated. He decided it was time to unleash an ace of his own. Sholtia didn't have infinite summons, so she must have been almost out. Still, things would take a turn for the worse if she used all the summons around her for healing. He'd been planning to use this when Einherjar appeared, so everything was going according to plan, except for the fact that she was killing her kin to heal. Aints had 60 class levels. One of his classes was rare. Almost nobody in Yggdrasil acquired it. He had it because he had ignored strength. He focused on mastering the ghost magic tree as part of his role-playing. It was a coincidence. It was born of a lopsided build. It would have rarely been seen among those trying to make strong characters. To even get the class, one had to be a level 5 Overlord. They also had to be highly specialized in ghost magic, and they had to have reached a minimum level of 95. In most games, these undiscovered classes, once discovered, were written about on strategy sites and shared. But in Yggdrasil, knowledge was valuable, so not many people would readily talk to others about, say, world items for free. It was especially true for classes that could be used as trump cards. The name of the class was Eclipse. The explanation of it in his status said, only overlords who have truly mastered death can acquire this class and eat away at all life, like the sun is eaten away at in a solar eclipse. And Aints was about to unleash a skill acquired at the highest level, 5, of the Eclipse class. It could be used only once every 100 hours, Eclipse S Ace move. It was called the goal of all life is death. At that moment, a clock pointing to 12 appeared behind him. He cast a spell. Widened cry of the Banshee. A woman's screams echoed throughout the area like ripples, and they caused instant death. It was difficult to resist, because it had been strengthened with his various other skills. But it didn't work on Sholtia, who was undead, or Einherjar, who was treated as a construct, because they were immune to instant death. What was strange was that some of the kin, who were immune to instant death, didn't die. Aints thought it was odd, but wasn't shaken. On the contrary, things have to be that way. Curse CHK. Along with the noise, as the magic began to take effect, the clock behind him began to count down. As Einherjar's lance attacks chipped away at his health, he looked at Sholtia out of the corner of his eye and lost hope. So I want to be able to just end this. Damn it, Perorancino, you gave her that to counter me. You didn't have to give her a revival item. He griped in his head to one of his best friends in the guild. While he scrambled to evade Einherjar's attacks, 12 seconds passed on the clock. The needle came around to point heavenward again, then Aints' ace move activated. In that instant, the world died. That was not a metaphor. It died, all of it. Einherjar, which had been brandishing its lance before him, turned to white mist and began to collapse. It died instantly despite being a construct and having no life. In the same way, all of Sholtia's kin were enveloped in a power they couldn't resist and died. That wasn't all. It brought death even to the lifeless air and made it impossible to breathe within a diameter of almost 250 yards. If anything was trying to breathe and live in that area, its lungs would have been polluted. It would have died from the dead air. The soil also died. Everywhere within those 250 yards around Aints instantly turned into a desert. In this world consisting of nothing but death, only Aints and Sholtia moved. This was Aints' ace move. The goal of all life is death strengthened spells and skills that had Instadath as an effect. This skill would kill even an opponent with an ability that made them immune to instant death once a certain time elapsed. To avoid it, one had to use some kind of resurrection effect on oneself within the 12-second time limit, as Sholtia had done. That Instadath skill boost was also why the air and soil had died. In Yggdrasil, the effect hadn't gone that far, but in the real world, it was expressed more accurately. Death to everything in equal portions. This unfamiliar result took Aints by surprise. In Yggdrasil, the dirt didn't die, so this is how much magic changes when you bring it into the real world. He nearly shook his head in disbelief, but he swallowed his surprise, driven by pride. Like a ruler, and with an arrogant tone that seemed to say it was all according to his plan, he spoke softly to the sole survivor. How does it feel to witness power that can deal death to the dead? A fresh breeze blew in, dispersing the dead air. Their voices traveled to each other on the same breeze. Marvelous. I am impressed as always, Lord Aints. All my kin are dead, but your MP is almost gone, huh? And my health, it's nearly full. The MP indicator reflected in her eyes showed he was as good as empty. There was a tiny bit left, but only enough for maybe 2 or 3 uses.